This video tutorial will provide you with an overview of Research Fund Administration and is being presented to you by Research Accounting, Financial Services at Queen's University. The tutorial is comprised of 3 different segments. The first segment will provide an overview of the life cycle of a research project. The second segment will cover various types of research transactions. And the third segment will cover policies and procedures for research transactions. We'll begin with Part 1, the life cycle of a research project. Research Accounting is a unit within Financial Services at Queen's University. Research Accounting staff are responsible for managing the post-award finances for all research grants and contracts at the university. Research accounting responsibilities include establishing new research projects, managing research revenues and expenses, providing guidance to the research community, preparing financial reports and invoices for research projects, coordinating monitoring visits and audits, and preparing the research component of the university financial statements. Queen's University reports over $150 million in research funding in its financial statements each year. When research funding is received, there are rules and regulations to comply with as part of accepting this funding. Research Accounting administers approximately 5,000 active research projects at any given time. Research grants and contracts are funded by various agencies and may include federal and provincial grants, grants funded by foundations and associations, clinical trials projects, U.S. and foreign awards, and projects funded internally by Queen's University. Examples of internally funded projects include research initiation grants and special research projects. Before a new project can be established, Research Accounting must receive the required documentation. A data summary sheet must be completed and approved for all research projects. This process can be initiated through the University Research Services Office. For externally funded projects, the agreement or contract must accompany the data summary sheet. For internally funded projects, supporting documentation is usually a memorandum or letter from the faculty or department funding the project. Once finalized, University Research Services will forward the approved documentation to Research Accounting. Once a new research project is established, Research Accounting will send a notification email to the principal investigator. The notification provides various details, including the project number and name, the fund and department which should be used for all project transactions, and the budget amount. Additional details regarding expense accounts and the signing authorization and portal access form for research funds are also included in the email. A completed and approved signing authority and portal access form must be returned to Research Accounting before project spending can begin. This form can be used to grant portal access for the purpose of viewing the monthly research statement of operations. It can also be used to delegate manual signing authority as well as signing authority for electronic salary contracts. There is no limit on the number of delegates which can be assigned. Research project budgets are established based on agreement or contract details. Allowable spending is usually based on the project budget, regardless of the actual revenue received. For example, if a project has an annual budget of $100,000 and revenues are received in monthly installments, the principal investigator would have access to spending the full $100,000 at the beginning of the year. Revenues for research projects should be forwarded to Financial Services to ensure funds are deposited to the appropriate project. Principal investigators or their authorized delegates are responsible for ensuring research expenses are compliant and claims are complete and fully supported prior to submission to Financial Services. Financial Services has a number of controls in place for the review of expenses, including system controls, the segregation of duties, staff monitoring, the research statement of operations, training, and website details. The PeopleSoft finance system contributes to the monitoring of research expenses by ensuring project budgets cover the amount of the expense and by ensuring appropriate chart field values are used. When system checks fail, a budget exception is generated by the system. Budget exceptions are reviewed by research accounting staff. Another important internal control relates to the segregation of duties. This means the different tasks should not be handled by the same individual. Research expenses are reviewed by financial services staff. Checks include compliance with funding agency guidelines, as well as university policies, authorized and 1/1 approvals, appropriate supporting documentation, and accurate chart field values. Claims must also include a detailed description explaining the nature of the expense and how it relates to the research project. A research statement of operations is produced for all active research projects on a monthly basis. Statements are available on the Queen's portal following the fiscal month end. The month-end schedule can be found on the Financial Services website. Principal investigators or their authorized delegates are expected to review the reports on a regular basis and inform research accounting if discrepancies exist. Research accounting is also responsible for preparing financial reports and invoices for research projects. Reporting and invoicing deadlines vary by funding agency and may be required on a quarterly, semi-annual, or annual basis. It is important to ensure research financial reports and invoices are reviewed and approved by research accounting. Research accounting acts as the lead in the coordination of monitoring visits and audits. These visits may be conducted by research funding agencies or Queen's University internal audit. During a visit, research accounting may request documentation from departments such as packing slips or procurement card transaction receipts. Once a project is completed, a few things must be considered. First, spending must be completed and commitments cleared by the project end date. Spending may only be allowed up to the end date for some projects, while others may have a phase-out or automatic extension period. If you are unsure about your final allowable spending date, please contact Research Accounting for confirmation of these details. A final report or invoice may be required upon project completion, and some funding agencies may release a final holdback only upon project completion. Finally, when a project has ended, it must be inactivated on PeopleSoft Finance. Guidelines for research projects will vary by funding agency. The consequences of misused funds can be very serious and may range from requiring reimbursement by the grant holder to the involvement of legal authorities. Therefore, it is very important that the university make every effort to ensure compliance with funding agency regulations. The second part of this video tutorial will cover different types of research transactions. The procurement card may be used to pay for research-related expenses. Please note dollar value thresholds do apply. Individual transactions cannot exceed $5,000, and the maximum monthly total per card cannot exceed $20,000. There are certain restrictions on procurement card purchases. Examples of transactions which should not be purchased using the procurement card include goods and services exceeding $5,000, office furniture, audio-visual equipment, materials requiring a government permit, alcohol or travel-related expenses. Please note that conference registration fees are eligible procurement card transactions. This is not exhaustive. You may visit the Strategic Procurement Services website for additional details. For research purchases $2,000 or greater, which do not meet procurement card policy requirements, the preferred method of payment is a purchase order. To create a purchase order, a purchase requisition must first be initiated through the PeopleSoft finance system. Once the appropriate approvals are obtained, the system will then generate a purchase order, which is reviewed and processed by Strategic Procurement Services staff. For all other purchases, with the exception of travel expenses, a check requisition should be used. Check requisitions may be used for employee reimbursements or supplier payments. The check requisition form is available on the Financial Services website and is referenced as Form FIN Form 010. There are various options available to individuals for claiming research travel expenses. One option is for the travelers to pay for their expenses and then submit a travel expense claim for reimbursement. A second option is for individuals to request a travel advance prior to departure. Some departments may choose to pay travel agencies directly. In order to do so, departments must have an agreement on file with Research Accounting and are required to retain travel-related documents such as boarding passes and itineraries in accordance with the Queen's Records Retention Policy. Please refer to the How to Pay Travel Agents policy on the Financial Services website for further details. FIN Form 006 may be used to request travel advances or submit travel expense claims. A research transaction may involve payment to an individual for services. An important factor to consider in this scenario is whether the individual is considered a Queen's employee. Payments to Queen's employees for services must usually be processed by the compensation unit using a salary account ID. These payments are considered taxable income and payroll deductions are withheld at source. In special circumstances, exceptions may apply. Please contact your HR advisor if you require guidance on these types of payments. For payments to individuals who are not Queen's employees, individuals may be paid on a check requisition by Financial Services. A detailed invoice describing the services provided should accompany the check requisition, along with the individual's name and address. If the individual is HST registered, their HST number is required. If they are not HST registered, their social insurance number is required, and they will be issued a T4A for income tax purposes. In order to pay a research expense, the appropriate chart field values must be indicated. Chart field values include the fund, department, account, program, class, and project. The fund, department, and account represent mandatory fields which must be indicated. For research or capital transactions, the project is also a required field. The program field is optional, with the exception of projects funded by the Canada Foundation for Innovation, and the class field is optional. With the exception of mandatory chart field values, departments may determine the level of detail they use when recording research expenses. Funds are 5 digits in length. For research transactions, funds 30,000 or 31,000 must be used. Fund 30,000 is used to record transactions related to externally sponsored research projects, and Fund 31,000 is used for internally sponsored research transactions. Departments are 5 digits in length and are set up in ranges based on their related faculty. For example, departments which fall within the Faculty of Arts and Science will reside in the 11,000 range. Accounts are 6 digits in length and are set up in specific ranges. Income statement accounts include revenue accounts which begin with a 4. Salary expense accounts begin with a 5, while non-salary expense accounts begin with a 6. Balance sheet account ranges include asset, liability, and net asset accounts. Programs are 5 digits in length and are only mandatory for CFI-related transactions. The program field is used to identify an activity or event. Classes are 4 digits in length and are used to identify a location or person. Projects are used by research accounting and physical plant services. Research projects begin with a 3 and are 6 digits in length. The third and final section of this video tutorial will focus on policies and procedures related to research transactions. The Travel and Related Expenses Policy is available on the Financial Services website. Queen's University is considered a designated broader public sector organization and is required to comply with the Broader Public Sector Accountability Act. Therefore, original itemized receipts are required for all travel expenses. When traveling for research purposes, the economy class should be used. Exceptions to this rule must be pre-approved. The affiliation of the traveler to the principal investigator must be indicated on the travel claim. Some research funding agencies may impose greater restrictions than the university policies. In these cases, the funding agency policies must be followed. Travel advances may only be issued to Queen's University faculty, staff, or students. Individuals who have been issued travel advances must submit a travel claim accounting for the advance within 30 days upon returning from their trip. Please note, subsequent travel advances will not be issued until overdue advances are accounted for. Advances are considered a debt to the institution and must be repaid if not accounted for. Principal investigators are responsible for any outstanding travel advances against their research projects. Reimbursements for meals is limited to the Treasury Board of Canada meal allowances. These rates, which include gratuities, can be reviewed on the National Joint Council website. Please note, incidentals are not allowable expenses. Original receipts are required for meal expenses. However, if you are planning a research trip in a country or region where there may be difficulty in obtaining meal receipts, you may request an exception to this policy. Additional details are available on the Financial Services website. Exceptions must be pre-approved prior to travel. Gratuities may now be charged to research projects funded by the Tri-Council agencies. However, they must meet certain requirements. Gratuities cannot exceed 20% of the cost of the meal, and they must be supported by receipts. Entertainment expenses charged to research projects must be for research networking purposes and are only allowable if deemed eligible by the related funding agency. Entertainment expenses must follow the hospitality policy requirements, which can be reviewed on the Financial Services website. A list of individuals in attendance must support entertainment expense claims, as well as a detailed description of the expense in relation to the research project. Individuals staying with friends or family while traveling for research purposes are entitled to claim $30 per night in lieu of accommodation expenses. Receipts are not required for these claims. Individuals submitting research expenses are asked to ensure original receipts or invoices are attached. For travel expenses, if applicable, please ensure boarding passes are attached. And for conference-related travel, the conference itinerary must be included with the claim. Approvals must be authorized by the principal investigator and represent 1/1 authorization. For example, If a principal investigator is submitting a claim for reimbursement, the claim must be approved by the department head or dean. For audit purposes, it is important to ensure a detailed description is included with the claim, explaining how the expense is related to the research project. A research expense checklist is available on the Financial Services website. Using this checklist as a guide for preparing research expenses may help avoid processing delays. Indirect costs, also referred to as overheads, include research expenses which may not be directly attributable to a specific research project. Examples may include library-related costs, computer network expenses, or utility costs. Some research project budgets may include indirect costs, while some funding agencies do not allow these types of expenses. The indirect costs of research policy is available for viewing on the Queen's University Secretariat website. Support and training information is available on the Financial Services website. If you have suggestions for training topics, please feel free to email us at research.accounting@queensu.ca. We would love to hear your ideas. Research accounting has its own section on the Financial Services website. Upon accessing the Financial Services website, refer to the Research tab, where you will find helpful links, documents, and contact information. General policies can be found on the Financial Services website. Thank you for viewing this video tutorial.